tariff regime, how much tariff are we putting to ensure that the local industries produce and are able to sell and also sell on the West Coast? And then even as the PBEC does her work, we need to look at exports. Export to where? I hear today that it's more difficult to export things from Nigeria to China than it is to export from Ghana to China. Meanwhile, some of the best honeys you get in the world, some of the best yams and so on that you get in the world come from Nigeria.
The Corporate Affairs Commission had in 2015 launched the online platform to make company registration less cumbersome, and only recently announced a reduction in the number of days and processes required for company registration in the country.
You cannot get funding from government, you cannot get funding from banks if your business cannot be verified. So there is this collaboration between the CAC and SMED and other agencies to ensure that all the informal businesses formalize their registration. And one of the ways to do it is to make the process of registration less cumbersome, to make it easy and cheaper. And the only way to make it cheaper is if the owner of the business will be able to do the registration himself. At the moment, the law requires you to submit a statutory declaration if you want to register a company by a legal practitioner that the requirements of the law has been complied with. Because of this concern, government looked at the framework. The law did not say the legal practitioner must be a private legal practitioner. For Nigerians that may not afford the services of professionals, government says, okay, let an employee of the Corporate Affairs Commission depose to that declaration on behalf of the person.
Well, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's start off by introducing our guests. I'd like to welcome to this program Dr. Jumoke Uduoli, who is a Senior Special Assistant to the President on Industry, Trade and Investment and Secretary to the Presidential Enabling Environment Business Council. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Let me also welcome to this program Ambassador Chiedu Osakwe, who is Special Assistant to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment and Chief Trade Negotiator. Ambassador Osakwe, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much indeed.
Let's also welcome to this program Ms. Yewande Sadiku, who's Executive Secretary, Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission, NIPC. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us tonight is Dr. Bode Oyetunde, who's Senior Special Assistant to the Chief of Staff to the President. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Now, as usual, we acquaint you with the procedure of this program. At the appropriate time, you can get to join in the discussion in the studio. The various platforms will be on your screen. We advise you take advantage of them. However, for those who will be calling in, we say this every Tuesday. When your call gets through, do us a favor, turn down the volume of your TV. Just reduce the volume. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. And the best way to know your call has been passed through is you'll see your name appear on screen. Once you see your name on screen, it means your call has been passed through. We advise that you just go straight to the point, ask a question or make a comment. Don't bother about the greetings. And I would like to advise that you keep it short so more people can get on the platform. So whatever issues you raise, our guests will be willing to address them. Once again, welcome to NTA Tuesday Live. Let's begin by first of all looking at the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, which was established in 2016 by the President. And let's start off by finding out what led to this. What were the conditions that made it imperative to set up this council? And let's begin with you.
Thank you very much. So the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council was actually a culmination of the work that had already been going on in the presidency. So, of course, business climate reforms are a priority of the administration from the beginning. And the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment also, when he came on board, made this a priority. So we started working with the World Bank on scoping and looking at the particular areas that are bottlenecks, internationally recognized across the board, 190 countries. And we decided as an administration not to try and reinvent the wheel. So a number of countries have had successful business climate reforms. A very well-known example is Georgia, Rwanda, Kenya, Botswana, more recently Cote d'Ivoire. So we decided that we would harness what works for Nigeria from those examples. So what you need is very strong political will, You need collaboration, interministerial, intergovernmental collaboration, which is at the federal level, ministers. You need it between the state governments. You need it with the National Assembly and the judiciary, and of course the private sector. So that's how it came about.
All right, we'll return to some of those issues. But let's go over to the opening comments of Ambassador Chidu Osakwe, who's you're the chief trade negotiator.
Yeah. What would you like me to talk to you about?
The ease of doing business. What are the strategies you have in mind as you negotiate?
Well, I think that where trade comes in is looking at the interface between domestic policy reforms, of which the ease of doing business is a major one, the interface between that as a domestic policy reform and our relationship with the region, the continent, and the global economy. It's absolutely vital that the country looks inward with regard to the role of government. And the program that with which he initiated the discussions was simply excellent. Intellectual property rights protection, registration of businesses, construction of value chains, the whole gamut of it. But after this is done domestically, the country, by which I mean the firms, the individual entrepreneurs, the small and medium enterprises. The country also has to think about how they interface with the global economy, with the continent, and with the region. It's not enough to look inwards, is what we're saying. We must do that because that's the foundation. But it's also important to begin to make our producers of goods and producers of services to think almost, to use a classical expression, in an imperial way. Because you grow economies not just by what you do domestically in your local market. You grow economies by expanding trade access in the region, in the continent, and in the globe. The word that is controversial is globalization, but nobody's going to get away from it. It matters. It matters hugely. So where you locate me, I'm hoping in this conversation, is in that interface between what my friends Jumoke, Bode, and Yawande do and what we have to do with regard to championing the firms, the individuals, our SMEs in the region, in ECOWAS. I will tell you more about what we're doing in the continent in terms of the continental free trade area negotiations and in other areas, free trade agreements and the WTO. It's a huge agenda, but it's an agenda that's absolutely proper for a massive economy like Nigeria is.
All right. Some of the issues too. Ms. Yewande Sadiku is the Executive Secretary of the NIPC. Yes, at some point in time, the NIPC was described as a one-stop center, but we'll come to that later on. But let's look at doing business in other climes and what Nigeria had been doing all along that was not, very business-friendly. It wasn't easy to do business in this country.
Yes. Nigeria has many things going for it. The size of the market, the size of the population, the size of the working force. But Nigeria is also perceived in many ways to be a difficult place to do business. And I think the big thing that Nigeria has going for it is that Nigeria is a must-invest market when you look at, for countries and for companies that are looking for growth. And countries and companies are looking for growth because when it comes to leadership and it comes to discussions about what matters in sectors and in the Committee of Nations, size is important. The person who has the biggest size, will sit at the head of the table. Currently, Nigeria is the 23rd largest economy, estimated to be, by different accounts. By one account, it will be the 19th, based on some work done by the U.S. Department of Agri, the 19th economy by 2030. A recent report by PwC suggests it will be 14th by 2050. So you cannot ignore it. And the work that the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council is doing ordinarily should be part of NIPC's mandate. But obviously the attention that is required, the urgency of the need was such that government needed to demonstrate the seriousness of its commitment to driving these reforms with something as powerful and effective as PEBEC. So at NIPC, we're very grateful for the existence of PEBEC, for the work of PEBEC.
It takes off the big chunk of the work of you, does it?
It makes my life so much easier. So we accommodate Dr. Oduole and her team by giving them space in our office.
All right, let's come to Dr. Bodi Oyetunde. You're Senior Special Assistant to the Chief of Staff to the President, and let's just get where you fit into all of this.
Well, actually, I'm a Senior Special Assistant to the President, but I sit in the Office of the Chief of Staff. So there are a few SSAs that sit in the Chief of Staff's office,
Right.
and we support the work that Dr. Jumoke and her team in the Vice President's office do. My particular focus is finance and fiscal policy, and in that regard, I've been working closely with the Economic Management team under the leadership of the Vice President, Ministry of Budget and Planning, and the Ministry of Finance. Specifically, through the EMT, we've been looking at various strategic plans. So early 2016, we came out with the strategic implementation plan for the 2016 budget, and the fifth item on that plan was ease of doing business. So we set out certain strategies, including trying to move up 20 paces from 169 to 149 or better in the ease of doing business rankings. Now, during the course of 2016, driven by the Ministry of Budget and National Planning and the EMT, we came up with the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. And basically that's our direction in terms of how we're going to look at economic policy and coordination of fiscal and monetary policies. And although it has got three planks, one is investing in our people, one is restoring growth. The third plank and objective of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is to ensure that we have an easier environment for our businesses to become more competitive and to take their stage and their place in the world stage. So I'll come back to that, but that's basically where my work in our office is fitted in, working with budget and planning on the economic plan.
All right, now let's go to certain specifics in terms of production. And these would determine to a large extent how people establish businesses here, and easily power comes to mind. And if you're still grappling with fixing power, how does that reflect on those who want to do business? Because the investor is going to be thinking of producing his own, providing his own power, and that, of course, is not very business friendly.
I assume the question is directed at me.
Right.
So definitely from the beginning of the administration, everybody can bear witness that infrastructure and particularly power has been a primary focus of the administration, both in the budgeting and in the plan. However, the soft infrastructure things also will not be neglected. And when we say soft infrastructure, I'm talking about regulatory frameworks, legal frameworks, procedures, service, customer service, things like that are what this council actually looks at. So whether there's power or not, we would still look at the steps that anybody interfacing with government would have to deal with. Now, definitely the Honorable Minister of Power Works and Housing has an aggressive plan to solve the power issues. Many of us are aware of the challenges in the sector. So I'll park that for a minute. But having said that, there's some simple, quick wins on our part as an administration, how you relate to the regulator with NERC, how you relate with the DISCOs, companies that want to connect to the grid. They don't have to go through, I think it used to be about 9 steps, and we got it down to 5 steps, just by looking at the procedures and how it can be easier for that process to exist. So those are the kind of things we want to bring to the lives of Nigerian businesses, just to simplify what is within our power while we work at those other hard infrastructure challenges.
All right, you call them hard infrastructure challenges, but okay, perhaps we jumped the gun a little bit, but let's go back. In our background report, we had one of the respondents talk about registering a business and all the numerous steps and the requirements. Now, what's going to happen about that?
So when you're starting a business, the main thing that affects you is the cost and the time. We were at about 10 days, and we're aiming to bring it down to 48 hours. Now, what we did was to work with the Corporate Affairs Commission, and you heard one of the special assistants to the Registrar General speaking earlier, to remove the bottlenecks that just seem to take a lot of time and the amount of interface of Nigerian public. Things like business owners being able to use the template registration process and apply for registration themselves without the use of a lawyer. It's optional. Things like having a consolidated form. There used to be 7. We consolidated it into 1. Things like being able to upload your documents onto the portal. Now, having said that, so a number of reforms have been achieved, reserving your name, but the portal has had some instability challenges. So even though we had this 60-day national action plan, we managed to execute, but the consistency wasn't there. So we got a lot of feedback from users. And because of that, we delayed closing the manual application procedure. So we've given CAC an extension of 30 days. So before the end of this month, they're actually working with private companies. Main One is going to host the servers and have committed to 99% uptime. And the portal is being stabilized by a company called Oasis. So it's clear deliverables, action plan, and Nigerians can hold us to it for the end of this month.
Well, we certainly will, but let's ask Ambassador Sakwili. So would you say within the period these measures have been put in place, have you witnessed any increase in the number of people wanting to do business here, as against in the past where companies had to think it out through before they made any move to Nigeria? Have you seen any?
There is, the Nigerian economy has a gravitational pull. Regardless of our challenges, and we have work to do in this economy, it's obvious. But as Yawande and Jumoke have pointed out, it's not only the size of the economy. There is a gravitational pull. I reuse that expression because of the opportunities, the abundance of talents, a very Nigerian spirit, which is, to a large extent, it's almost more obvious outside of Nigeria than inside of Nigeria. Everywhere you go, and all of us have been around, in and out of this country, there is a very Nigerian spirit, which is a spirit of enterprise. And so there is a headhunting of Nigerians. There's a demand for a talent. In the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, where I work, there is a queue, a regular queue, a constant queue, a huge queue of businessmen and women making inquiries. Some are probing. They come in different categories. Others are making bids, some expressing real market commitments. And so the answer to your question is yes, it's there. But we have to improve our play. I think we now have to go beyond where we've sat for a long time. That because we are big, that because we have the opportunities, that because we're a major player in ECOWAS, that it will happen. It won't be automatic. So the push is there. Investors are knocking at the door. Some are still in a holding pattern. So it's obvious, but we have to make all this come together. We have to string it together.
Now, you do expect that you'd have, more foreign direct investment here, but many people would say to you that if local investors are not jumping at these opportunities, and the foreign investors would be a little more hesitant. So what's the local investment climate like in this case?
Can I comment?
I probably think it's I probably think it's your I should not steal your fire.
One of my favorite topics.
Mm-hmm.
So Nigeria is interested in foreign investment, in foreign direct investment, in foreign portfolio investment. But in terms of investment in establishing industry, it would usually, be foreign direct investment. And we want to compete for our fair share of the FDI flows around the world. In fact, I dare say we want to compete for more than our fair share of the FDI flows around the world. But anecdotally, you hear all the time about how wealthy Nigerians are. And just to your comment, we think it's important at NIPC that we're encouraging the generation of the development investment capital that exists in Nigeria. So in particular this year, we have a domestic direct investor drive that is aimed at encouraging Nigerians to invest in their own country. We're still working through some of the details, but we've been working, at least in my 6 months at NIPC, we've been working with several state governments on generating, first at the informal level, lists of wealthy Nigerians on a state-by-state basis, because we believe that it's important in the formation of this domestic investment capital that we have a proper representative spread across the country. We don't want it to come from just one part of the country. We don't want it to come from just one region. And the object is that these individuals will then form the anchors for our engagement about what it will take to get Nigerians to invest in their own country. We certainly think by tracking and by reporting what we're doing in relation to domestic direct investments, that we give foreign investments even more confidence in coming to the country. So it's something that we feel particularly strongly about, and we're working with the state governments on many levels. That's just one of them. We're working with the state governments on many levels. At NIPC, even though we're a federal agency, every investment that we generate will sit in the states, unless it sits in the FCT or the continental waters. In fact, this afternoon we had a session for state investment promotion agencies, and I was teasing some of the states that if they manage to generate investments in their states and they don't engage NIPC, we'll still take credit for it because we're a federal agency, but we would like to work closely with them to multiply our efforts. But generating domestic direct investments is an important part of our strategy at NIPC.
All right, let me just stay with you a little longer. And now the issue of the one-stop shop scheme, how has that been driven now?
The one-stop shop started in March 2006. Many people are not aware of it. It's been going on now for 11 years. And the object of the one-stop shop, even at that time, was focused on making it convenient for people to do business in Nigeria. It is conceived as one location where investors can get approvals and information from different government agencies. The one-stop shop currently has 27 government agencies, and it's all the engagements you can imagine that you need as an investor, starting first with NBS, the National Bureau of Statistics. So we feel very strongly that an investor will not make a decision on investing in a country, in a state, and the like, without first getting access to information. Then the next stage is to register the business as CAC. Then to FIRS to get a tax identification number, to Nigerian Customs if you'll be importing, to Ministry of Interior and Immigration if you need expatriate quota or if you need visitors, if you need visas for your visitors, to NOTAP, to NAFDAC, to Standards Organization of Nigeria, to NERC, to Central Bank. There are 27 agencies anyway that sit there. Some of them have a physical presence, and others have a focal officer, representing them, because the frequency of requests is not that high. But the one-stop center, it is, I would like to say for now it is analog. But we're working, but our ultimate target is to make it even more convenient for investors to access digitally.
Right, the phone lines are already open. We have our first caller tonight. Calling in from Suleja, we have Idowu. Hello, Idowu, go ahead.
We are talking about ease of doing business. Most of the time we talk about the foreigners, and we don't talk about the entrepreneurs, the young ones. Sometimes when you are talking about the entrepreneurs here, you talk about age limit. If you are above 35 and you want to do something, you are unable to access some fund, this and kind of a thing. And at the same time, you look at the foreigners that we are competing with. Most of the time when they collect this job, we are the Nigerians that we still do the same job. And the government pays them in dollars, and at the same time they will be paying us stipend for doing the work. If we are competing for such a work, the collateral or the kind of experience they will be coming with the question from you, we won't be able to meet up. What are you going to do about the entrepreneurs, the young ones that don't have the money to do this kind of a business? They are talking that we are many in this country that we are doing this kind of business, but we are suffering from the kind series of laws. Let us talk about inside out ease of doing business before we talk about the foreigners or foreign investors first. And at the same time, the civil servants, most of the time, registered companies and use the different kind of people to hide under such, and at the same time give such contract out to themselves. At the same time, the entrepreneurs will be the ones suffering. What is the government or this present government doing about this? Thank you.
All right, Idowu.
Wow.
Actually, the issue is about investment. I suppose that your worry is about funding for those who wish to invest and access to funding, which is, of course, one of the factors that we have listed here.
I can speak to. So, thank you very much for the questions and the comments, and I could actually feel the pain, and this is at least 3 of those issues have been dealt with at the council or raised and are being operationalized. The first one, access to credit, is actually one of the things that we're working on, and what the council has been pushing this year in particular is 2 bills, because remember I mentioned at the beginning that we need to have legal and regulatory frameworks that make doing business more certain, secure, costless. Now, access to credit is something that disproportionately affects MSMEs, and actually the whole initiative is targeted at making things easier for MSMEs. So we've been pushing 2 laws in partnership with the National Assembly, the Credit Bureau's law, the Credit Bureau Bill, and the National Collateral Registry Bill. Now, those 2 bills, the way they help entrepreneurs like Idowu are that if you have a credit bureau record, then you have credit history, and banks are better able to give you credit for your businesses because they have more comfort and they would rather take the risk when your credit history is tried and tested and proven. And this is a known strategy across the world. So making that legislatively backed by law makes it much more stable and secure. We have 3 credit bureaus currently operating in Nigeria, and I urge just every SME to make sure that they're registered and they have sound credit histories, because it will make it cheaper and easier to access credit. That's the first thing. Now, the National Collateral Registry makes it easier for SMEs to use their movable property to access credit. So you can use your machinery, your cars, everything apart from land to access credit from institutions. So some banks, it opened last May, and already we have about 7 billion naira worth of property registered on the collateral register. When you have laws backing that framework, then more banks will go onto the collateral register. So they're not scared that you've sort of put a lane on your machinery in Abuja and then you go to Lagos and take a loan. So it's a national registry. So those are two things that could help. Any other areas?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we have another caller, this time from Anambra, Ebele. Hello, Ebele.
Hello? Yeah, I'm on the line. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, please, you talk about this issue of entrepreneurship. So we that are started, we are starting off as leisure. Please, do we have, hello? Please.
Yes, Ebele, go ahead.
Hello, please. What I want to say is that we that are approved now in area, we don't have any capital to start any business. But in any way, according to what the government says about helping, about helping now to people that don't know how to work at of business. So when we went towards the kind of pressure that put on the type of payment to us is too much. And it's needs to run away from the head.
Inaudible.
Oh dear. Hey Billy, I'm so sorry. The line isn't clear at all. We're finding it extremely difficult to get what you're saying. We may just have to ask you to call in again, to try again. Maybe the line will be clearer, but we just couldn't get it this time around. So just try and put in a call. Try and call in again, and maybe the line would be clearer. All right. Yes, we seem to be going in the same direction as the first caller talked about, access to credit, and of course some of the issues that have been raised here include tax regimes, and that in itself is one big worry for investors.
Well, if I may speak to that, there have been several reforms we're looking at achieving. One of the key policy planks of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is ensuring there's a stable macroeconomic environment. In the past, we've relied almost exclusively on oil wealth, not just to drive the oil sector, which is about more or less 9% of GDP, but there's a large amount of the non-oil sector that does depend on the earnings from oil to import inputs, market, and distribute locally. And so what we're looking to do is diversify under the plan. And one of the key areas there is to try and increase our tax to GDP ratio, trying to focus more on non-oil revenues, and also trying to simplify and strengthen our tax administration system. So significant policy planks under the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is focusing on taxation, not just in terms of increasing revenues, but also making it easier to do business. However, one key issue is our tax take is quite small. So by different accounts, our tax GDP is about 5%, 6%. We're looking to increase that over the medium term to about 8 or 10%. So that's one key challenge we're looking at. And it's also part of the social contract to see people get value for their money, so they're encouraged to pay taxes more. So that's also part of it.
Yes, but there have been so many attempts in the past to do something about what's been referred to now as multiple taxation, and people have to pay so much to so many organizations, and at some point in time it just takes away everything you're trying to do, and that in itself is a drawback. The other issue also has to do with these numerous agencies that people have to deal with. If you speak to some small enterprises, they'll tell you that by the time they're through with NAFDAC, Standards Organization, so many of them, well, she mentioned about 27 of those.
27 that sit at our one-stop investment.
Okay, and for going through with a small business, you probably have, if you're into production, you probably have to go through maybe 5 or 6 of those, and The process is what people complain about. It's cumbersome. What's been done about that?
Well, there are two issues here. One is the tax issue in terms of simplifying our tax regime and making it easier for taxpayers to assess what taxes are repayable and to pay to the right or relevant tax authorities. The second issue, of course, is the regulatory regime, not just taxation, but business registration, standards, compliance, etc. So I'll speak probably to the tax issue, then my colleague will probably speak about the regulation. So on the tax issue, we're looking at different reforms that have been ongoing but have not come to a close in terms of simplifying the tax system. There are certain attempts to look at simplifying our tax laws to make it easier for taxpayers to assess what is payable. We're looking at different countries have done different reforms in terms of bringing about simpler means of assessing tax liabilities of different companies and individuals, and perhaps looking at certain schemes to encourage people to come voluntarily forward, declare their assets and income, and then see how we can ensure that they pay the right tax. However, Nigeria is a complicated country. We have a federal regime, and there are different tiers of taxes accruing to different agencies. So if we can get more taxes focused on, for instance, the indirect taxes, VAT, etc., then we can focus on simplifying direct taxes, income tax, corporate tax, and then encouraging the local governments particularly and the states to reduce the number of taxes they levy. But at the same time, this is the federal government I'm speaking for and from, and the states and the local governments have a separate regime.
Oh, okay. We'll return to the issue of value-added tax, but we have another caller on the line from Jos this time. Mohammed calling in from Jos. Hello, Mohammed.
Hello, good evening. How are you?
Good evening. Go right ahead.
What I want to contribute to is that the federal government of Nigeria have been making a lot of economic decisions since during the Babangida era up to this present democratic dispensation. And we know that we have trust in the Buhari administration. But why is it that the federal government, especially the position of Jumoke, cannot compel the state governor to form industries which they have comparative advantage? Like in the northern part of Nigeria, there is no fertilizer complex in the whole 19 states. There are no companies that will process our, let's say, tomatoes. So, in fact, we have a lot of compounded problems, especially in the northern part of Nigeria. Why is it that the federal government cannot just die? And the second thing is that Nigeria consumes a lot of vehicles. Why is it that we cannot tell Japan to come and establish industries that will produce spare parts for the vehicles we consume? Why is it that we take long periods in taking certain technical decisions and making a lot of blossom programs that will take us 2020, 2030, 2050. In fact, some of us will even die. We will never even see any of these programs that the federal government are talking about. So me, I'm in the position that, look, just take Jumoke especially, take a bold step within the presidency. Let's invite Japan, come and establish, or we stop consuming your vehicles. France, come and, like they have done in Peugeot, and other countries that we are consuming their intangible assets in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
All right, so you heard the man.
I did, and I understand. I mean, really, what I would say is there's actually been quite a bit that has happened in at least everything that he's mentioned with agriculture and agribusiness, moving goods from the north down to the south. On the auto sector, funny enough, I was working on that last year with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. We've had actually the African Association of Automobile Makers working with the NDDC to just make sure that the policies, what they need are some requirements. We've actually invited them over. They've asked for legislation. They've asked for financing structure, about 4 things, and that we're actually working on. So the NADDC has been working aggressively at hitting all those that will make it comfortable for the big auto manufacturers, the original equipment providers, Of course, spare parts is one thing that we've been eager to have. Tires, we used to have Dunlop, we used to have Michelin. So everything he's saying is correct. That is exactly the direction in which we are going into. It's not even a 2020 plan. It's what is happening now. So I'm pleased to share that with Mohammed.
If I can just add to Jumoke's comment in relation in particular to auto. In collaboration with NADDC, NIPC is actually organizing an automotive components conference in Lagos on the 13th and 14th of June. And the object is, before you get auto manufacturers to come, there are different components that are required by a car that it will be useful to have manufactured in Nigeria. And the object of that conference is to socialize automotive components manufacturers. And we've engaged a number of countries in which automotive parts or car makers are, to get them to come to Nigeria. We've also had conversations with leading car manufacturers in different parts of the world about establishing manufacturing facilities in Nigeria. As you know, a number have already done so. In particular, I refer to, the car manufacturers in Nigeria. Innocent makes cars in Nigeria. Coscharis Motors assembles Ford cars in Nigeria. The object is not that Nigeria remains an importer of cars. Nigeria is a country with 183 million people. There's no country in the world that makes cars. Every country assembles cars. And using our trade and investment policies, our object is to move some of that value that is added in the car assembly process to Nigeria. So we're completely aligned with the caller.
All right. At this point, we'll take out the cameras and talk to some Nigerians. They've got what they understand by how business is done, the ease of doing business. Let's talk to Nigerians.
Any loan from bank, of course, we all know the interest rate. That interest rate cannot help any business to thrive. So, unless government itself is really committed and serious, what government needs to do is soft loan. That's number one. Number two, creating enabling environment. Electricity, good roads, water.
As far as the commercial banks are concerned, or the merchant banks, they don't seem to want to key into this arrangement because probably they are not used to it. What they are usually used to is just lending people money to do business and getting collaterals and all that. They are not used to, or probably they are not. They need to get this orientation on how to assist entrepreneurs to give them, to make it easy for them to access loans, and so that they can also grow the economy at the same time.
The process for you to get the loan is not encouraging. And some people will be frustrated, they can't go on going, maybe you don't have collateral, or even if they say there's no collateral, no the Nigerian factors.
That getting loans now is going to be easy according to the federal government. Probably it all depends on how the federal government wants to do it in between federal government, CV, and the banks. But the unfortunate thing is, in most of these things, you would discover that, like in the administration of Buhari, I'm sure he will do his best to see that things get easier for Nigerians. But it all depends on the people handling it. Our problem is corruption. That's what is not allowing a lot of things to work.
Banks are not helping small businesses to go in Nigeria. In a situation whereby you need a loan to finance, soft loan to finance your business as an entrepreneur, as a small business owners, the banks in Nigeria will send you to a business oblivion. So that is the first challenges, that every right-thinking business owners in Nigeria, faces. Our banks are not helping matters. Another thing is a government policy.
Having an access to loan in this part of the world It's like a camel passing through the eyes of a needle. Why do I have to say that? In the first instance, the government are not helping issue. It's like they are making a lip service. And it's not everybody that is accessible to loan. There are people ordinarily when they go to the bank, it's like a risk. There are cultural factors. When you go to the bank will ask you, bring this, bring that for collateral. Up to the extent of telling you, please go to your district head and let them recognize whether you are part and parcel of that community.
Well, it would seem that more people are talking about access to credit. That seems to be the baseline.
I think access to credit, between power, access to credit, you get a lot of feedback on that. And like I said earlier, so the thing about banks is that banks are strictly regulated because these are depositors' funds. And banks cannot give out depositors' funds when they're, people say, okay, I went to the bank, I didn't get money. But the money in the bank is people's money. If the bank goes under, then, I mean, everybody would be like, where was the CBN? How come the bank was so risky or so? But what we've tried to put in place are regulatory measures that would ensure that the banks are more comfortable to give out riskier loans. And the reason why MSMEs are more risky than established corporates is because all the structures are not yet there. They're growing businesses. So it's a catch-22. But nobody in the world starts a business with a loan from a bank.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'd just like to go quickly back to what earlier caller Mohammed from Jos referred to. I wonder what your approach to this would be. He doesn't seem to like long-term, plans. He'd rather have a quick fix. Do you see this as a quick fix, or medium-term, or long-term? Because that will now take us to the issue of sustainability.
Maybe.
Right.
Maybe I should speak to that in terms of the plan. So, to follow on what Dr. Jumoke had said earlier, many aspects of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, which is a medium-term plan looking at 2017 to 2020, build on previous plans. So we had the Vision 2010, we had the Vision 2020, and some of the policies that were continuing, for instance, the automobile policy, were started under previous plans. The challenge, however, is if you look at across the other countries we looked at when we're developing the plan, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc., most of these countries have sustainable plans that dovetail into each other. For instance, China was on its 13th five-year plan. Indonesia was on its 9th. So you have to have some continuity in government policy, and the planning framework is a good basis to have this. Going down to specifics, we've got power and access to finance, the key issues. In the plan, what we look at is trying to enhance power generation and also deal with some of the long-term issues. Recently, there was a power sector privatization. GenCos and DISCOs were privatized. But there's still some nagging issues, for instance, DISCO liquidity, trying to ensure that MBET, the bulk trader company, can de-risk the market so that GenCos get paid on time and DISCOs can pay for the services, pay for the power that's being supplied to their consumers. So there are various aspects of the plan, particularly a power sector recovery plan, that have been approved, particularly in March. And we're looking to try and ensure that we build on the previous policies and also ensure that we have got a sustainable framework to go into the future. In terms of ease of doing business and accessing loans, we recognize that some initial projects may not be the sort of projects that are bankable from a commercial banking point of view. So what we're looking at is enhancing our development finance institutions. We're proposed 15 billion naira, and we're looking to leverage more capital from foreign multilateral lenders to capitalize the Development Bank of Nigeria, ensure the Bank of Agriculture and Bank of Industry have capital to lend. We're also looking at the social investment program, pursuant to which we have R500 billion naira invested in some social projects, focusing on small and medium-sized businesses, ensuring they have small soft loans, and also looking at enhance the capacity of artisans and traders. So there are various projects we're trying to do. We're trying to ensure that every SME or every business has different ways of accessing the funding and the capital and the support they need. So that's why the planning framework is useful, because you provide a holistic basis for development.
Let me make a couple of points. You know, all the questions, even the barely audible a question that we had from Abele and Mohammed in Jos, and the footage that you showed us. There is a street level view to the issues we're discussing, and there is a cockpit view. What is obvious is we're dealing with the same question, and that question is this: how do we drive a growth in the Nigerian economy? And how does government, in its role, create an enabling environment for SMEs, small businesses, major firms? The answer is not a simple one, but there are best practices and there are answers to these questions. Number one, absolutely important is coherence between fiscal, monetary policies and structural reform policies. There has to be an interlock across the whole gamut of policies to be able to deal in a systematic and coherent way with the questions that you're hearing and the concerns of Nigerians. Part of what I heard Abele in Enugu asking, I had something like, how do we pay credit cards? And so you have to deal with areas of the 21st century economy. That is part of the ease of doing business. That is a priority for this government, and that is the digital economy. Yesterday, the acting president, Professor Shinbajo, presided over the third quarterly briefing dialogue with the private sector. And this was one of the key areas. We have to shift this economy from an analog, to use Yawande's expression, to a digital mode. We have to be able to do things quicker. E-government, greater efficiency, digitization of data. It's only when we begin to achieve this level of efficiency that we'll be able to respond in real time to the concerns and comments that you hear. Second question, and this is in part what I gathered from what Mohammed in Jos said, compel Japan. I love that verb. Compel that economy to come and invest.
Are you in a position to do that?
No, we're not in a position to do that, but it tells you something about the urgency of the response that economic policy managers have to implement and deliver to begin to respond to the real concerns of Nigerians. And this is where trade negotiations come in. Mohammed, we cannot compel them. We can't even compel domestic Nigerians with our federal structure, but we can negotiate with them to be able to come to this country to invest and to begin to have a better distribution in terms of the resource allocation, in terms of the distribution of comparative advantage across this economy. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. But again, a point that I would like to place on the table is about the coherence of policies.
All right. We probably would require this negotiation skills to, like you talked about, to get the states and probably local governments to buy into what you call the comparative advantage in investing in certain areas. But we'll take a short break here. Stay with us. When we return after these messages, there'll be more on the ease of doing business. This is Tuesday Live.
Nigerians, Our fearless officers and men of the Nigerian military are winning the war against Boko Haram. Today, all occupied territories have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, they are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me. Nigeria, unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
Make you report any crooked person, object or wakajube movement to police and security agent demo.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. Now, Federal Ministry of Information and Culture bring on this message.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. The discussion has been going on behind the scenes here about how easy it is to do business here. And just before we took a break, one of his answers, Ambassador spoke of policy, getting a coherence. And this is what many Nigerians talk about. Yes, you have something in place now, and we tie that with the issue of sustainability, but we haven't, we've always had policies and plans, but they have never really translated into action that's needed to address all the challenges we've had with the economy. So what's different this time around? You still hear government agencies churning out certain statements that seem to be at variance with what's happening in the center. How do you coordinate all this?
Well, I think, if I may jump in, if we're speaking specifically about ease of doing business,
yes,
then the coherence and the cohesion is right from the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, the PEBEC. You have as members about 10 ministers: finance, industry, trade and investment, interior, transport, foreign affairs, all power works and housing. All the ministers that ought to be in the room are in the room. The head of civil service is a member. The CBN governor is a member, and of course is chaired by His Excellency the Acting President. What this does is that the agencies under these ministries that basically engage with Nigerians on a day-to-day basis. You have FAN, Customs, Immigration, Corporate Affairs Commission. Their line ministers are directly responsible. The heads of agencies are also directly responsible. And you have the reforms cascading down. So it's starting a business, getting credit, getting electricity, paying taxes, little things that could make things easier for SMEs now. We have like a short-term, medium-term, and long-term intervention plans. In the last 60 days, between February 21st and April 21st, we had a 60-day national action plan, which were some quick wins that we identified. And what we set it out transparently. We said what we would be able to do in the areas of saving cost and saving time, whether it's trading across borders, Nigerian ports, customs, ports authority, terminal operators, working together. It's no more silos and isolation. So the presidential will, with the collaborative spirit of clear timelines, has made it very successful. We ended at 70%. And we didn't just leave it at that. The 30% that was not achieved, the council committed a further 30 to 45 days by each item to get them done. Now, what I would say a bit, I would just go on and say the next things.
All right.
Yeah. The next thing that the council has set out as the next agenda is, number one, driving down the reforms. Because it's one thing to say, okay, for importation and exportation, for import you needed 14 documents. That has been cut down by a presidential directive to 8. For export you needed 10. It's been cut down to 7.
All right, yes, these are by presidential directive, but the question is, are these directives working on ground?
That's what I was telling you. That's what I was telling you. That is one thing to have a presidential directive, but we've engaged with stakeholders. You've had the bad experiences, you're cynical, there's a trust deficit, but try it. Go onto the portal, try it.
All right, and some are saying that some of the reforms are not quick enough. They're not happening fast enough.
To build Cyril, to build on the points that Jumoke has made. There are several things. One is that you're absolutely right about the vital importance of a coordinated and unified government. Working as a singular entity, pointed in one direction and trying to achieve the same things. It's not always easy, not just in Nigeria, but in other governments there are tough issues. But I think that Nigerians should know that one of the finer things, I believe, that's happening, and a story that is not frequently told, is coherence in government that is very systematically being achieved in the economic management team of this government that's chaired by the current acting president of the country. It's very serious. It's focused across fiscal policy, monetary and structural reforms, and these take place every Monday. But you're right about this translating into the real lives of Nigerians. I think it's also important to say in this regard that the effects will not be overnight. The damage to this economy it took place over a long period. And so there has to be patience for lots of these reforms to take effect. Final thing I wanted to say, Cyril, is there is also a role for all these policies to work. There also is a role for the attitudes, individual attitudes and orientations of people like me and you and all Nigerians.
All right.
Every individual action has a social consequence.
Well, we'll talk about that in more detail as we go on. But let's get this call through. Sani is calling in from Abuja here. Hello, Sani. Is Sani still on the line?
Emmanuel, calling from Abuja. I want to make a contribution related to the ease of doing business in in Nigeria. I appreciate the contributions that have been made so far, even though I didn't start off from the beginning. But what I've noticed so far, because I do business development, is that when we talk of ease of doing business, we most of the time look at how it favors multinationals and foreign organizations that do business in Nigeria. And it would be, in a way, unfair when we don't look at local businesses and how they find it easy to cope in our environment. For example, everywhere in the world, SMEs are critical components of what drives businesses. So when we have SMEs that are not functioning properly, it becomes an issue. Because even when you bring foreign organizations, you are able to woo them to come and invest in our economy, you still need local businesses, SMEs, to still complement and play that role they are playing in supporting the GDP. And one issue we have is the issue of cost of operation. And that takes me to the issue of power. You'll be surprised how many small-scale businesses run on electricity per day. And then issue of power has not been sorted out properly. The implication of this is people have to run on diesel and run on fuel on a daily basis. And that's why over time, people become so discouraged from going into manufacturing, because this is a sector that depends heavily on generator, on diesel, on fuel, where people incur huge costs. So when power cannot be sorted out, when we cannot get power right, it will be difficult for businesses, SMEs, to thrive effectively in the country. That is one. Then secondly, I think we also need to complement our market research data. It will not also help it will not only help local industries, but also foreign multinationals. You are in Nigeria, you don't know what products are available in Sokoto. You don't know what quantity, you don't know what supply source, you don't know where these materials, raw materials are available. So if relevant agencies and government establishments can come up in this regard, providing adequate data, which will aid planning, which will aid market research, and which will aid further business development activities, that will actually support businesses. So I feel, as a contribution, if we can sort out the issue of power, which is the central piece that drives every SME, and we can also complement making our data accurate. Right now, we cannot say this is the actual population of people living in this area. This is the actual population of those living here. It becomes difficult to plan. And so most business plan, and they plan on assumption, plan on National Population Commission statistics from 2006, and that becomes difficult for businesses. But if we can complement business in this role, I think we'll be able to achieve development.
Thank you very much, Sani. You had a comprehensive contribution there.
Indeed.
Very intelligent comment.
One of the things you spoke about is data and statistics, the absence of relevant information. Given an example of being here, not knowing what's produced next door and how that can impact on whatever business you're setting up here. So how are we working on these?
What he mentioned about data, and I referred to it when I spoke about the agencies, about the importance of getting investors information. It's very important, and it is true for many government agencies. The government has a lot of data. It just happens to exist at the moment in a form that may be somewhat inaccessible. So there have been a number of reforms at the National Bureau of Statistics over the years, and they've increased not only the quantum or the variety of information available, but the quality of that information. So NBS is regarded, because it is in fact a reliable source of information in Nigeria. And even in our own engagements with NBS, they've said to us, if there's information that you need that we don't track at the moment, just let us know and we will track it for you. At NIPC, we also recognize that we have a lot of information that we ourselves will, and I'm just being honest to Nigerians here, that we ourselves will struggle, we have a lot of data that we ourselves will struggle with communicating as information, because it largely exists, in files. So we're going through a process of digitizing some of that information so we can turn the data, raw as it is, into information that will enable, that will empower investors. We're doing this also in conjunction with states. We have a national investment certification program for states where we started working through the Dawn Commission with the South-West states as a pilot. The object of that national investment certification program for states is to teach states about 3 standards that they need to encourage investors to come to their states. The first one is an information standard, and it speaks to information of the sort that an investor would require to make an informed decision. So we recognize what San is saying, but the process of putting it in place in reality will take some time. And at NIPC we're working with state governments, working on a state-by-state basis. There are 237 people. It will take us some time to cover Nigeria, but the object is to cover Nigeria, to certify states, as I mentioned, on the basis of 3 standards: information standard, property standard, and a marketing standard.
On this digitization of records, this is one of the reasons why it's a priority to digitize the economy in its entirety.
All right.
And also,
just quickly back to the phone, so I will return to you. And from Calabar, we have Michael. Michael, hello. Hello, Michael.
Yes, good evening.
Right, go ahead.
Actually, I just want to recommend you to go for this kind of program. Hello? Hello?
Yes, Michael.
Yes, I want to recommend you for this kind of program. I really love it.
He's commending you.
Oh, okay.
He's encouraging Nigerians for so many things. Although NEPA is people that interrupt in so many businesses. But I just want to put an appeal for the federal government also that please, wherever they want to do some programs, they should also involve so many things. We shouldn't do it by tribalism. We shouldn't do it by religion. We should just carry everybody along, because I really appreciate President Muhammad Buhari for what he's doing. But let's do implement of the planting of the crops should not just stop by the north. We should also extend to the south, and southeast, and everywhere in Nigeria, because we think that encouraging so many of us, we ask everybody to go and be a farmer. Yeah, it's a great thing for us to do, because so many of us, we have so many acres of land which is wasting, like when the former president, Obasanjo, is having a farm where he's planting palm trees. So we have a lot of land there which is in Akamba local government, that's in Cross River State. There's a lot of land, even we want to farm from here, we have a boundary with Cameroon. People can come and do the investors can come there and do their business successfully, and nobody will interrupt it. And as you know, Cross River State is a place that there's peace, there's harmony, you don't tell us anybody, you just go your normal businesses. And also, in power sector, NEPA is always treating us bad, very, very bad. Because you will see sometimes somebody will just say maybe 1 or 2 apartments that we just say a room or 2. And you see at the end of the month, they will give you a bill of 30,000 naira. And you don't even think maybe you're working or not, because so many of us, we are not working. We are not working, there's no job. So we are just begging the federal government, if they can bring this kind of initiative of business, they should extend it down to this side. I am ready to be a farmer. I am ready. Even there's a support that they can give to us, because I tell a place that I wanted to drop my fish, that I couldn't complete because there's no money. There's nothing to do and bring our resources. So I really appreciate this program. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. Calling in from Calabar.
If I respond,
yes, please.
If I may respond to some of Michael's comments. So in terms of, for instance, looking at different regions and their needs, there are certain activities that are ongoing. For instance, one key focus under the plan is diversification and focused on agriculture, food security, as well as industrialization using SMEs and focusing at the grassroots. So recently, last month, we met in the presidency and the Minister of Niger Delta. We met with commissioners of agriculture and commerce and industry of the South states and Enugu. We're focusing on trying to ensure that agro-processing is prioritized. And what we're looking is a different approach, not just having the states invest in agro-processing, etc., but the states identifying small and medium-sized businesses in the states that can benefit from loans, from technological support, from fertilizer, access to fertilizer and inputs, pesticides, insecticides. And we're scoping, and this is an ongoing project directed by the Mr. President. We're looking to engage various SMEs in those states particularly and focus on reducing post-harvest losses, optimizing yield, and also creating jobs for the SMEs. Now, in the past, the approach was always federal government giving the states grants and states going on setting up little businesses. But we found that this is not sustainable. What we're looking to do is get the right information, going to the point that Yewande made about scoping the information and looking at the needs of SMEs in the various states, and also encouraging them to sort of look at other ways of financing. So not just loans, but also looking at grants and trying to empower development finance institutions to lend to them. So that's one initiative that you'll see more of as we progress. The second point is power. This is one of the key issues we looked at when we were, the team was looking at the plan, the core team, and one of the key issues is metering, trying to ensure that meters rolled out, trying to ensure that we have a cost-effective tariff. The challenge, however, of course, is there was a MITO system, medium-term tariff order system, that was supposed to ratchet up the pricing of power, so that as eventually moving from a subsidized situation to a fully cost-reflective tariff, that could happen over time. Unfortunately, because of challenges with the foreign exchange and other inputs, that has had to be suspended. But we're looking at how we can deal with the different aspects of the power sector reforms, and particularly trying to roll out meters. So people, as the caller mentioned, pay for the power they receive and rely less on generating plants and other more expensive ways of providing power.
Okay, we have from Lagos, Naji. Hello, Naji.
Hello, Cyril.
Yes.
Yeah, Cyril, good night.
Good night.
Hello. Well.
Good night. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, a lovely night to the gentlemen and ladies there. Can you hear me now?
Yes, just go ahead.
Okay. Cyril, I have to commend you in particular because Cyril Stoba has become an household name. Yes, you have become an household name, and whoever chose this topic for today has become a very technical person. I love the technocratism that he has exhibited. The topic is the ease of doing business.
Yeah.
The ease of doing business. Doing business where?
Yeah.
Where are we talking about? Doing business where? This program, it works internationally. Even though you have Nigerian SAs there, and you, Cyril Stoba, everybody knows you with NTA. You see, that is the problem Nigeria has. Governance in Nigeria is not rocket science. We have gone beyond the act of sitting down and brainstorming and talking about it. You, Cyril, you will bear witness that this may not be the first time that you are hosting or anchoring such a program with such very technical topic. You have solved Nigeria's problem on television. The day we will stop politicizing our economy in Nigeria, Nigeria will grow. I see no reason why a sitting governor will leave office and another governor will enter with his cohorts and change the color of the taxi or buses in their state. And they will spend so much money to change this color of the taxi. Lekki Ekpe Express, they built us road with roundabouts and a toll gate that the case is still in court. As I speak with you, they are removing the roundabouts and giving us junctions. And nobody in Nigeria is asking questions. Who were the town planning technocrats who sat down to design roundabouts, and under 10 years, it is not working. So, upon what premise did they get their blueprint for this roundabout? The money has gone, taxpayers' money is still being spent, and we are paying more money. Serious, I tell you, this is not about, somebody said 2020, 2030. It is true. Look at the crop of young people there. Senior special assistant to the governor, senior special assistant to the president. That is not what we need. Whoever will lead Nigeria, the day God will bring the person, we will stop holding such programs. This is not what we need in Nigeria. The most popular people in Nigeria are people in government. Look at my young brothers and sisters there sitting. They go and get your data from the private sector. Go to the businessmen who run SM. I have 3 generators in my house. As I speak with you, the light has gone off more than 4 times. The light has gone off more than 4 times, and it has been off for like 3 weeks. And I live in Lekki area of Lagos, the high brow. So when I see things like this, I love what you are doing. You are doing your best. But that is not the solution to our problem.
All right.
Fulani headsmen, nobody has arrested one person. Nobody has arrested one person. Nigerians are crying. And people are saying, look, the moment you are afraid to tell the truth in Nigeria, then Nigeria will go down. Everybody in Nigeria solves Nigeria's problem in their bedrooms. People, every Nigeria is saying that the reason why no Fulani herdsman has been prosecuted is because the president is a Fulani man.
Okay, well, Naji, thank you so much for calling in.
I just pray that these looters, hello?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I want to say more. I just pray that God will give us leaders, not rulers. Because everything that is happening in Nigeria now is so sensitive.
All right. Okay, thank you very much, Naji. We understand and appreciate your sentiments, but again, let me state that a program such as this is one of many avenues to seek solutions to the numerous problems that you spoke about. So thank you for calling in. And just to look at some of the other challenges that have to do with doing business in Nigeria, we take the cameras again to the citizens. Let's see this bit of it.
To this loan, there's this double taxation here and there that comes up. You go here, this council, this union, they come, they say, look, you have to pay for this, you have to pay for the sandboard, you have to pay for local government and what have you. All these are multiple taxation, and this only happens in this part of the world. It's not obtainable in elsewhere, whereby a loan has been granted to you. That's what they call tax holiday. They need to give you all those kind of incentive to enable you to stand your feet, to take off properly before you started contributing to the society.
I want a loan to get the machines I will use to, to do a very good business and to serve the citizens, the masses, because my company is all about courier, parcel and cargo delivery within Nigeria, and if God blesses international. But I need good vehicles to convey and deliver at a given time. Otherwise, you are not ready for the business. So the bank asked me to come with my registered company certificate, a corporate account, and all of that. Then we'll start discussions from there. But I want to see that for some of us who have registered company, we don't need all this rigor. I'll have to travel. That means I have to travel from Lagos, from Abuja here to Lagos to see my banker, and we'll start discussion from there. It's not as if after the discussion you're going to get what you so desire to work with. Painful to see that there is so much money in Nigeria, yet you cannot get in as little as 1 million naira. Naira, not dollar, but dollars and pounds are found in people's homes. You want to do business that will eventually grow to become international. Look at China. The government of China give their citizens money to do business, and they don't pay anything in return. They don't pay any interest. So long as they prosper, the citizens of China prosper, that settles it. Why can't we do the same for Nigeria?
Setting a business in Nigeria, I'm not sure it's not easy. Because one, let's talk about the small scale business. You will be told you have to have the NAFDAC before you could easily sell out your goods. Like for those people that manufacture liquid soap, you see they told us, you do your liquid soap, you can easily sell it, but it's not possible. Because by the time you take it to the market, the next question is it registered? And now if you go for registration of a product, you will be asked of different requirements, like having a building, a structure, then you have to go for one test, and the machines you have to use must be modern machines and not the local method. So if you are telling a poor person that actually is not a government worker, actually that doesn't even have a means of feeding his or herself or his family to go registered on all this long process, I'm not sure it's easy in making a business in Nigeria, except if government will make it a free method of you just produce and sell it without registration, which I know is impossible.
Normally, these things are supposed to be very, very easy. But because of the government we have, they've made things so cumbersome. People are even scared to go get money. And now the banks, they are saying that they made money available for banks to get to customers to get money to start business. But if you're starting business and you go to your bank wants you to bring with collective.
Well, some Nigerians talking about the challenges they face in setting up business. It would seem that we're back to the question of interest rate, access to finance, and taxation. I'd just like to go back a little bit on the question of taxation and just how policies can be implemented. It's a little bit difficult to do away with the multiple taxes that people have to pay, really. Even when there is a move towards harmonizing this, you still find local councils and states using all forms of, taxation to circumvent whatever has been put out. How do you get around this?
You're absolutely right. The questions that we've heard reflect the pulse of the country. And this particular question that focuses on taxes, multiple duties, charges, non-tariff barriers, it's a major problem that we have to deal with. I'll add to it one example that came up yesterday in a delegation that came to meet Minister Enelama, the Minister for Trade, Industry, Trade and Investment. No names, but that delegation complained very robustly to the minister that between Lagos and Seme border, there are 53 checkpoints. And they're hitting Nigerians and ECOWAS nationals who are basically trading. And we know that trade is an engine of growth. Minister Enelama was exceptionally crystal clear that this is a problem. It has to be dealt with, and there are very many angles to it. But to move from that example back to the conceptual issue that you put on the table, at several levels, this is the way to look at it. Taxation is a constitutional requirement. It's the bond between a government and its people that is codified in citizenship. But we have to set that aside, and that's what Bode has talked about. The problem we have is the problem of multiple taxation, of hidden taxes, of charges, of duties, of brown envelopes under the table. It is killing business, it's stereotyping the economy, and it's hindering the ease of doing business in this country. And it's a collective problem. And part of what Jumoke and Yawande and frankly Bode have said effectively is policy, good policy, sound policy is one thing, but we also have to think about our behavior as individual Nigerians.
So let's look at that. The government can only do so much.
True.
What's the role of the citizen now?
If I may add a bit on what exactly the government is doing. So consolidation of taxes to make sure, it's annoying to entrepreneurs when you have little taxes. It's a federation. There's federal taxes, there's state taxes, there are levies. So we've been working with the Joint Staff Tax Board and with FIRS and also with state governments, Lagos and Kano in particular, to make sure that there's consolidation and then those taxes can be split back end. The chairman of FIRS informed the council last month that even, because we have a new reform coming online, which is called Trading Within Nigeria, to address some of the issues that came up in the last comments, NAFDAC registration, SON, NOTAP, also transporting of goods within the country. Even what Ambassador Chiedu just referred to, when you're coming down with goods from the north to the south or taking them from the ports to the east, the number of official and unofficial tapping, you wonder why goods cost a certain amount in one part of the country and a certain amount in the other part of the country. How much is petrol? How much are trucks? But all that money is taken on and added to cost for the consumer. So the council is laying down firm, clear directives, working with different MDAs to make sure that there's order and synergy. And those are part of the reforms that are being rolled out as a practical answer now to the issues.
Let's hope that can be enforced, because you travel from Abuja to Kaduna, for instance. The minute you cross out of Abuja, someone is demanding payment for some funny levy or the other. And, even within the cities, you find officials, all they need is just a reflective jacket and...
Yes, so that's one of the things that we're actually working from the council. A survey is being issued to SMEs to really name and shame which agencies are giving you the toughest issue. We've had a lot of feedback. We've had specific names, and I've mentioned a few: police, customs, NAFDAC, SON, a number of them, and what the issues are exactly. So we're taking that feedback to prioritize and what exactly the issues are for the entrepreneurs.
And I'm hoping that this is an issue that you would pursue in your programs. I would say that there is a pressing need for a national conversation on the multiplicity of charges and taxes across the country. It is probably one of the most fundamental issues, together with power, to improve the enabling environment for business in this country.
All right. So
just to add to what my colleagues have mentioned, on a macro level, you have to look at where we are coming from and where we are and where we're going. We're in a recession. Federal government has taken significant shocks in terms of oil revenue, which is our mainstay in funding expenditures. Last year, at the beginning of the year, we had record low oil prices based on the recent past. So we went as low as below $30 a barrel, whereas a few years ago we were at 120, 110. We also took a knock in terms of production midway through last year. So you have a lot of states that since last year, since this administration came into power, have been on life support. There have been series of loans and other budget and non-budget support the federal government has provided with the central bank to states. And there's a fiscal sustainability plan that's been rolled out and championed by the Minister of Finance, trying to ensure that we not just raise revenues but cut costs. And we try and get states to adopt the same measures the federal government is taking to be more efficient. Now the idea is basically, as the fiscus improves, as the economy recovers, the revenue base will increase. And then we can wean the states off this life support we've been providing from the federal government and central bank. But at the same time, getting the states more efficient, focusing on fewer taxes, harmonizing the taxes, and also potentially going forward, looking at VAT. Now, the challenge with VAT, of course, is that most of the VAT proceeds go to the states. Federal government take is only 15%. 85% goes to states and local governments. So there has been some clamor in the past about it raising rates, and I think there was some attempt under the previous government, Obasanjo moving to Yar'Adua, and Minister Nanadi at the time, Minister of Finance, increased VAT rates and there was a kickback. I think part of it also is a social contract. Nigerians want to see value for money. They want to see their tax revenue, their tax dollar, their tax naira in this case, being used prudently, not ending up in stashes of people keeping money, etc. Corruption, governance, these are some of the issues we're trying to drive. So as you see the green shoots coming through, you see better governance now that we've got very strong political will to see some of these reforms go through, you'll find that the fiscal will change and there'll be a more focus on indirect taxes such as VAT, which have a broader base and then fewer direct taxes.
Of course, I did say earlier on that there are also issues about VAT because I recall, was it an attempt at one time to raise VAT and the citizens were up in arms over that?
Yes, there was. So I think at the time Obasanjo regime was ending and Yar'Adua was commencing. Then I think the Minister of Finance was Nadi, and then there was this move to increase it from 5% to 10%. Now, technically, under our ECOWAS protocols, and Ambassador Chiedu tested this, we are looking to raise VAT over the medium term, long term, to where it is in other countries. So we've got a record low VAT rate in Nigeria. Our peers, 10%, 15%, 17.5%. The challenge, of course, is value for money. And at the time, I think there was a pushback from the public. There were protests, there were some riots. And in the end, the federal government capitulated and took it down to 5%. It's something we're looking at. But the challenge is also, what are we showing Nigerians for value for money? And that's the attitude.
So that's the core question. Yeah, so it's about whether they're getting value for money. And as we begin to wind down, I still want to go back to the question of attitudinal change. If, for instance, I walked into NIPC, the policies are there, the government thinking is clear, but again, I've got to deal with people in NIPC, and if their attitudes are not in consonance with the new thinking, then not much will be achieved. And beyond that, even the citizens themselves, what role do they have to play in all of this?
Okay, and I'm happy that you talked about the attitude of the people. So an important part of the reforms at NIPC is in strengthening the institution from the inside out. When Jumoke was talking about membership of PEBEC, she referred even at the PEBEC level to 10 ministers, the head of the civil service of the federation, and then the central bank governor. We recognize that all these reforms, it will be public servants, it will be civil servants that will be responsible for carrying these reforms and running with them. At NIPC, we see ourselves as an interface between investors and government because our act empowers us to act in that role. So we see ourselves, because of that, as a cross, if you like, between the private and public sectors. We're public servants, but we're private, commercial thinking public servants. And we find, even with the agencies that sit in our one-stop shop, they don't think generally like their colleagues in the civil service. They tend to think as business-minded public servants do. But the object is to make sure that we deliver the things that we promise. But Nigerians also have, a contract is a two-way thing. So we have an obligation, government has an obligation to initiate reforms to improve things for Nigerians. Nigerians also have a responsibility to allow those reforms to live through and to test and challenge those reforms and to give feedback where the opportunity is. A bribe only exists if somebody asks because somebody gave in. Amongst other things, if we want our country to improve, Nigerians need to out those who are asking so that government can do its own bit. But it only happens because somebody gave. If we say that we should all queue, somebody will decide that their own time is more valuable than others, and they don't want to queue. They want to go to the front of the queue, not for any reason. And there's nobody in government that was born in government. Everybody in government came from the man on the street, came from the private sector, even if the person was a public servant. Everybody in government is a Nigerian first and is an ordinary Nigerian first, interfacing with government services in the different aspects of their lives. So it's important that we, as the government statement says, that we be, the change that we want to see.
All right, Ambassador Sakwe.
Building on Yowande's point, put it differently, but to complement her point, we have to raise the level of civic responsibility in Nigeria. We have a civic challenge. Why is it, and this is the question that's asked all across the globe, why is it that outside of this country, the best performers, the most enterprising, some of the most brilliant people you have in terms of individual talent, creativity, and innovation are Nigerians? It's all in the public domain. I'm not disclosing a secret. But back here in Nigeria, we're challenged with regard to the way we comport and carry ourselves. There is a civic challenge. We have to raise the level of civic responsibility. We have to think about the context in which we are operating. But the beauty of this program, as I saw it today, was that in the range of questions that we had, it covered it all. Accountability by government, rule of law, sanctions for bad behavior, the critical areas. When I listen to some of the people in your footages who identified areas of priority, they were actually reiterating the areas of priority in the economic recovery and growth plan, almost by consensus. So we also have to worry, as we worry about government and improving the play of government, and we work for government. Nigerians, we also should all be concerned about how we behave as individuals in terms of our civic responsibilities.
All right. I keep coming back to what we're doing as a council. On top of the 3 pillars of the 8, the trading within Nigeria and working with all the state governments and the Federal Capital Territory, the people issues cut across. Earlier today, I met with the head of civil service. There's a Servicom that needs to be repositioned. So we've started that discussion because giving customer, in fact, we've already started with the level of response to complaints, whether it's on social media, whether it's at offices, that has already commenced. And I think a lot of people, even the IBIS Twitter handle, very active indeed, responding to issues. And we're having a hackathon at the end of this month for Nigerian techpreneurs to actually come up with a whistleblowing app that anywhere across the country, name it. If the reforms are not hitting, call it out. We want that transparency, that accountability.
Perhaps many more Nigerians would latch on to that.
Yes. Call it out.
If that be included as well.
Yeah. For our reforms.
Well done.
For our reforms.
All right.
Yes.
That's okay. Well, it's been interesting talking to you all on the matter of ease of doing business in Nigeria. But as I always say on this program, no one program can take care of all the issues. And so we'll have to leave it here. And some other time we'll take another look to see how these reforms have trickled down and how they're working so far. But for now, let's say a big thank you to all our guests. Dr. Bode Oyetunde, who is a Senior Special Assistant to the Chief of Staff to the President. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Let me also say thank you to Ms. Yewande Sadiku, Executive Secretary, Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission, NIPC. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Ambassador Chidu Osakwe, Special Assistant to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, and the Chief Trade Negotiator.
Thank you very much indeed.
We've got some of those skills sometimes.
Thank you, Cyril.
And thank you very much to Dr. Jumoke Uduali, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Industry, Trade and Investment, and Secretary to the Presidential Enabling Environment Business Council. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Right. Thank you very much. And thank you to you for being part of this program. Next week we'll reach you again on NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stover. Bye for now.
Information is power. Everyone